No mai haere mai, ko Shannon Dowsing tōku ingoa. Welcome to the Exchange Cafe. At the Exchange Cafe, we come together to share conversations and resources about climate solutions. We're fortunate to have Tāmati Coffey in the studio with us today, Labour candidate for the East Coast electorates in the upcoming 2023 general election. Tāmati, welcome. Thank you for coming into Rāngai. It'd be wonderful to hear a little bit more about yourself, in particular your ties to the region.
Yeah, sure. I whakapapa to many different places. Our coffee name comes from Tairāwhiti, but we're born and bred Te Atiawa ki Pōneke, so down in Wellington, in Lower Hutt, yay for the Hutt. But also I've got whakapapa back to Rotorua, Taupo, to Tauranga, but also to Tolaga Bay here in the region. My nan is born and bred Uawa, Tolaga Bay. She grew up there. She is now lying there in the cemetery next to the beach. So our connections spread ourselves right across the kind of the central North Island area. But Gizzy's a place where I've got plenty of good memories, and as I say, Nan's just up the road.
Yeah, I think that connection to region is really important. Do we expect to see a lot of you in region when you're elected?
Well, yes, we want to see how the election rolls out first of all. But I'm actually really looking forward to a positive election. And then potentially being able to move here to Gizzy. It's not a hard sell. Gisborne's beautiful. I think it gets more sunshine hours than most places around the country, first to see the sun, but also that whakapapa connection as well, which is really important.
Yeah, I think that the sunshine hours is a good segue into our conversation today around the climate. We've been starved for sun for a couple of years now. We kind of came out of COVID to the most abysmal weather you could imagine. So look, let's move on and set the scene a little bit. So we're focusing on the environment and climate change today, and your party's policies on and how they might affect the Tairāwhiti. As you know, New Zealand signed up to ambitious emission reduction targets, and that's under the Paris Agreement. But so far, we're looking unlikely to reach those targets. The science is telling us we have 6 years left to at least half our emissions, and that's if we don't want to be caught in a dramatic climate collapse. There's a high level of concern among New Zealanders, particularly rangatahi, but we are calling for more urgent action and effective action. What's your party's commitment to climate action, and what plans do you have to halve those emissions in the coming 6 years?
Yeah, so we signed up to this as a country, actually. So despite what parties we all align to, actually we've got a shared goal of trying to reduce our emissions so that we can reduce our impact on the environment as a people. And there are some people out there that think, oh, but New Zealand, we're so small, what does it matter, let's focus on the big polluters out there around the world. But actually I believe that we've got a responsibility to be able to do our part, however that looks. So we've put in place this in the last few years, the first of the climate change budgets. So essentially we've said to ourselves, if we're going to reduce our emissions, then we need to put some budget behind that. And actually whichever government happens to be in at the time, that needs to be ring-fenced so that we can put that money towards climate initiatives. So we've done that, and we are rolling out a suite of initiatives to try and get our emissions down. Things like the clean car discount, encouraging people to move away from gas guzzlers and into more efficient cars, increasing access to public transport, making that free as well, so that especially young people can jump on the bus and take it for free, again, getting them out of their cars, but also getting big industry involved in reducing their emissions too. So quite recently we signed an agreement with New Zealand Steel and with Fonterra, who have large emissions, but actually partnering with them to say, if we do a partnership, and we put some money in and you guys put some money in, do you think you could reduce your emissions? And they have come to the party. With the New Zealand Steel deal that we did, think of all of the cars in Christchurch coming off the road because of that deal that we signed with them. So all of the emissions from 300,000 cars in Christchurch off just like that because we've partnered with industry. So trying to tackle some of those small things on a day-to-day domestic way, but also some of the big polluters as well, working with them to try and reduce their emissions too. That's important.
Yeah, very important. So Tairāwhiti is vulnerable and being severely impacted by climate change and severe weather events.
Yep.
Our lifelines, including our roads, our water, our power, our communications were all cut off in a single event. What will your party do to support Te Tairāwhiti and prepare for the impacts of climate change?
So first of all, people of Tairāwhiti are pretty resilient. I mean, my whānau were involved in Cyclone Bola from a on-the-ground kind of perspective. My uncle used his boat going around Tolaga Bay trying to help whānau out that were impacted by that weather event. It keeps on happening. People of Tairāwhiti are pretty resilient, but the government have got a role in being able to strengthen that resilience as well. So straight after Cyclone Gabrielle, we swung in with a suite of packages to try and just get the roads open, to try and clear some of that debris, to stand up some Bailey bridges to try and allow people to be able to move and not be cut off. That funding was put in place, and now you can actually drive around the coast in one fell sweep. Even though the roads are a little bit gnarly at times, but what are the learnings that we take away from that? One, the communications, they got cut off after Cyclone Gabrielle. We need to do better in trying to make sure that communication is still a thing after a major event like that, because that was one of the most anxious parts, was that whānau weren't able to let other whānau know, hey, I'm still alive and I'm safe. That's important. We need to make sure that our bridges and our roads are built back better, so that we're not just building roads in the same place where the slip happened last time or where the road fell away because it's so close to the water. So we've put some putia aside to say, is this the best place to build back that road, or should we be looking at something else, which is a lot more long-standing and sustainable? All of those things are happening right now, and I'm pretty proud that just yesterday our Prime Minister came to Gizzy and announced some funding for the whānau out at Te Karaka, who have decided that they want to stay there despite having had quite a rough deal during Cyclone Gabrielle. They've decided they want to stay there, but actually they've said, can we just put our houses up on stilts? And it's a thing that is actually effective in trying to mitigate when the next flood might come through. So those are things that they want to do. Those are things that the government stepped up to support them with too.
So the ministerial inquiry into land use laid out a roadmap of recommendations, and that was to address the immediate and long-term risks facing the region. How will you incorporate the recommendations from the report, and what actions do you think need fast-tracking?
Well, there's quite a few recommendations in there, but I'll focus in on just a couple of them. One being that the Gisborne District Council have said that they lacked the capacity to be able to really swing in and do the regulatory work that they need to do with the forestry companies to make sure that they're employing best practice, that they're actually sticking to the terms of any consents or permits that they've got to be able to go up and do the felling. Forestry companies have come to the table too and said, we can do things better and we want to do things better. They're helping with the cleanup of the slash on the beaches, which is the right thing to do too. But we need to have a long, hard think about what role forestry plays in Tairāwhiti. It employs a lot of people, so we don't just want to say no more forestry at all, because actually there are still trees growing out there that will still be growing in another 50 years' time. But we need to start doing practice better, working with those forestry companies to say, how can you clean your act up a whole lot better? How can we resource the Gisborne District Council to understand their regulatory role in there? But also, where are the other opportunities? And one thing that was talked about in that report was a biodiversity market, and that's really exciting stuff. You know, that's innovative stuff which will kind of create a market-based solution to allow people to plant out in natives, to do a whole lot more biodiversity work, but actually for that to have a value attached to it too. So at the moment, people see the value of pine, and that's why we see pine everywhere. And many forestry blocks are just planted out in pine. But can we do things better? Can we diversify that? Yeah, we could. And I'm really excited to keep working on what that biodiversity market might look like.
So we need to transition towards a sustainable and economic future for Tairāwhiti. We're already seeing industry, land use, healthcare, education and transport being disrupted. What does your party see as a just transition for the region?
Yeah, there's huge opportunities. I mean, just out at Gisborne Airport, the large solar farm that's going on out there is a classic example of how you can take land which actually doesn't have much other purpose, because if it's on an airport base, there's limitations to that. But what we are seeing in different parts of the country are these giant solar farms saying, we've got land here, we can put solar on here, we can generate our own power, which will help our business, and any excess power, we can feed that back into the grid for everybody else to be able to use as well. So stuff like that that's a space which is filled with potential for Tairāwhiti. We get a lot of sun out here, usually we get a lot of sun out here. And so maximising that opportunity is big. What do wind farms look like in here? That's not widespread, and yet you go down to Palmerston North and all up around the hills there. They've got big power generating wind farms, and that's a good thing. The potential for geothermal in our country is huge, and we live on tectonic plates, for better or worse. But where's the potential in that? We already have some geothermal power plants around the place. Can we do more of that stuff? But even one of the latest things that I've been noticing is in England, they have machines in the water actually just generating power from the movement of the tides and the water going against these machines, and that in itself generates power. So these are all really awesome opportunities that I think we need to trial and experiment with and just make sure that we're doing right. But the second we know that we're getting it right, we need to look to scale those kinds of initiatives up.
Well, let's go on to businesses, because as you know, we're all under increasing consumer pressure. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint and our impact on the environment. How will your party support businesses, large and small, to decarbonise?
Yeah. So I mentioned before about the deal that we did with New Zealand Steel, which actually just by themselves, they account for 1% of New Zealand's emissions. So we're saying, let's partner with these big companies using a fund that we put the government, it's called the Giddy Fund. It's all about decarbonising alongside big businesses. So with the deal that we've done with New Zealand Steel, that takes 300,000 cars off the road, or the emissions from 300,000 cars off the road a year. That's really positive. Working with Fonterra as well has been really important, and they have partnered with us, and again, we will see an overall decline in our emissions as a country because of that partnership. At a more local level, there's lots of opportunities for businesses to step into this space too, and that's exciting. The biggest thing that we've come out with just in the last week has also been around solar power for houses. So we have rolled out a program over the last 6 years which has enabled about 40,000 houses around New Zealand to put solar panels on the roof. And that's new. We're still in our infancy when it comes to solar panels in New Zealand, but there's some real opportunities in there, and we've said that if we're re-elected, that actually we're going to create opportunities for a kind of a subsidy, so a $4,000 subsidy for households that want to be able to invest in solar panels. And what we've learned from the 40,000 we've done already is that people are saving basically 50% off their normal annual power bills. That's a lot of money to be saved. And we're saying that if we are re-elected, then actually we will continue to roll that out, continue to offer that subsidy, and continue to see opportunities from solar.
Yeah, in a business landscape, that's attractive for a business like mine, where we are a large power consumer. We've got lights on everywhere in this room.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to consider what that would look like if rolled out to businesses, given that, I'm not at home to use my power when the sun's shining, but I am here.
Well, I think that there's also opportunities for those businesses that want to get involved in this too, because somebody's got to install the solar, right? And somebody's got to understand what the technology is and where there might be innovation as well. So I'd like to think that there are opportunities for business in the supply side of this as well, not just the consumer side.
Great. We'll move on to energy, and we're already delving well into it, knowing that it's an area that we can improve in this country, even though we've got a great deal of renewable energy already. We know that localised, community-based energy projects are effective in cutting emissions and increase regional resilience. Cyclone Gabriel demonstrated the urgent need for local self-sufficient electrical supply systems. And there's already been successful trials with remote communities in the regions. How will your party remove the regulatory barriers that and increase the R&D to community-based energy products so that we see more resilience, particularly in our coastal communities where being cut off means diesel generators can't get to them, and
we have reformed the Resource Management Act. So that has been the one piece of legislation which has governed how quickly we can roll out new opportunities in sustainable renewable energy. Previously, it's been quite hard. If you want to start up a wind farm here in Gisborne, actually the regulatory barriers are large, and it can often be a long process, and that process can be a disincentive to want to even invest or play in that space. But what we've done is we've reformed the RMA so that we have made the process of applying for something like a renewable energy project cheaper, faster and better. And that's the goal of the whole reforms, was that people were telling us it's way too hard to navigate that resource management system to be able to do something like this. We have had the end goal in mind, which is that we want to be able to create opportunities to get into renewable energy and to make it cheaper, faster and better. And with the reforms that have now passed and are part of our law now, it will be easier for that to happen.
Amazing. So power companies are making record profits while households are struggling with soaring power bills, and of course that's not the only soaring bills in our life, but it was recently reported that the 4 biggest power companies had a combined earning of $2.7 billion over the last year. What will your party do to accelerate the adoption of cleaner energy options such as wind and solar? And will this actually have a benefit to New Zealand households?
Yeah, well, so we're already doing stuff in that space. So, like I mentioned, the getting solar panels onto houses is one thing that we've done. We are looking and investing strongly into new forms of renewable energy, but also down the consumer end. While we're doing that big stuff, actually it's been a long cold winter, and many whānau have wanted to turn the heater on but have felt the cost of living pressures that we're facing at the moment. So we've also gone in there and said, as the government, we think that if you're in one of our most vulnerable communities, low incomes, the lowest of incomes in New Zealand, and also some of our senior citizens, that actually we've put in place a thing called the winter energy payment, which is just a little koha from the government out to those 2 specific demographics to say, over the course of winter, when it is at its coldest and it's 0 degrees outside, and you have to decide whether or not you eat that day or turn the power on, that we think that you should be able to turn the power on at the very least, because when people get cold, they get sick. When people get sick, they end up in hospital. And so, yes, we should be doing the big stuff and trying to tackle that. But in the meantime, the winter energy payment has been something that we've brought in to say, here's some support over the cold months of winter, here's how we can help you out. And that's something that we're committing to this election to carrying through.
Great. So let's move on to agriculture. We've committed to a global methane pledge that will cut New Zealand's net greenhouse emissions by 50% by 2030. What will your party do to support farmers to reduce their agricultural emissions?
Yeah, work with them. That's the short and the long answer. Work with our ag sector, work with our farmers. I've never been a believer in kind of that dictatorship, this is what you must do. Yes, we've got a goal. How we get there, actually, let's get around the table and work that out. So that's what we did. So we created a plan called He Waka Eke Noa, which talked about how we're all in it together. The farmers, the businesses, the iwi, government, local government. Actually, it was a partnership that crossed over political lines too. Actually, we all thought that it was a good idea, jumped on board, but actually part of that was allowing our agricultural sector to come to the table with its best ideas. The thing is, we put a time limit on that and said, you can only think about it for so long. At some point, we're going to need to act. So that time is fast approaching. I really hope that I know that our farmers want the best for the climate too, but we definitely need to attack some of the bad practices that are out there and maybe move away from intensive dairy farming, which we know has got a really strong environmental impact. But I'm still a fan of working alongside the industry as opposed to giving them a whack with a stick and making them, come along on the journey. I don't think that that's a resilient way to be able to create solutions.
Yeah, I think they've already, in this region anyway, we've all had a whack with the stick recently. They've all come down the river, and I think our, not just agriculture, but I think we are seeing the desire for change broader in our community anyway. So yes, I think working with them is a great option.
And also, I'll just chuck this on the end too, working with our tech sector and bringing those two worlds together to say where are the opportunities as we're trying to reduce our emissions, how can tech help us? Because tech has unlimited potential. We don't know what, tech is so fast in its evolution, we're trying to catch up with what AI means for New Zealand and all manner of things that we do. There could be real opportunities there too for reducing our emissions as a country. And I know that farmers are interested in those conversations. I'm interested in that too.
Awesome. So let's move on to biodiversity. The region is an example for all New Zealand of the damage that planting monoculture pine, whether that be for forestry or carbon farming, has resulted in unprecedented damage to our land, waterways and biodiversity. How will you address the current ETS settings that financially incentivise the planting of monoculture pine over natives, for example?
Yeah. First of all, we need to just have those bold conversations and get it into the heads of many of our people who understand that pine is the only answer and has been for a very long time, since after Cyclone Bowler. The whole place got planted out up and down the coast with pines. They thought it was the best thing to do. And whilst it is definitely a place for plantation pine forestry, for processing, for chip, for wood, for houses, all that kind of stuff. Actually, people have started realising the benefits of planting native, planting indigenous species, and I think that there's room to be able to do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other, that actually you can have on your farm, you can have a little bit which is actually, part of your farm that you use for your sheep or your beef. It can be a part of the farm that's the steep hill country where you can actually plant that out into pine, but you can also have some indigenous forestry growing over on this side too. So taking a more diverse approach to how people utilise their land, I think is going to be the key into the future. But I also laugh at this kind of stuff because I think of our koros who went out into these big wide sections of our coast and ripped out native bush and manuka and all of these things that we now see as rongoa, and we understand the benefits of our native forest. Well, actually, back in the day, they thought it was the right thing to do to convert all of that rich, lush, indigenous plantations to pine. And I think we've come full circle and starting to go, actually, maybe we shouldn't have done that. But now that we're here, can we do things better?
Yeah, I think it's even more ironic than that, in the sense that not only was it, initially we tore it out for grazing land, right? Then we suffered Cyclone Bowler, and then we replanted to protect infrastructure. So the silt build-up was estimated to require raising our bridges every 25 years.
Yeah.
If unabated, so pine was the answer to stop sediment flows into our rivers and erosion. It was also the chosen solution to protect the land alongside our main water pipe into region.
Yeah. 25
years on, and those very protections caused the exact damage we planned to avoid, and incentivized by the ETS. And I think yes, if we use a little more Bataranga Māori instead of imported science, and observed our nature, we would have better results. But we keep suffering the same fate.
You don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, I'm sure that at the time they didn't know that this would be the catastrophe that they were creating, and that New Zealand's filled with examples like that. We go into it filled with this is the right thing to do, and then years down the line we go, actually that wasn't the best thing to be able to do. But you can only do so much, and in the time that we've got available to us, I'd like to think that we can really put our shoulder to the wheel, use tech as much as possible to try and find those solutions to our environmental issues.
Great. We're in a biodiversity crisis. Our tonga species are at risk. It's proven that the biodiversity crisis is as important as the carbon crisis. Will you support the development of a biodiversity credit for New Zealand?
Yeah, the first that I'd ever heard of that was through Hekia's report, obviously. I don't know enough about it. It sounds good to me, but I think that we probably need to develop and mature that conversation a little bit more, because government may have a role to play, but the question is, well, what role is that? Because markets are often, free-flowing operations that happens. But yeah, my question would sit around what is it that the government could and should do in this space to be able to incentivise this to happen? Where are the good examples of it happening overseas so that we can make use of best practice? And how do we insert our mātauranga Māori into that conversation too, and try and promote that as we're moving into what's a very new space for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Our waterways have become contaminated with excess nitrates, silt, runoff from farms, slash from forestry. Then they're no longer safe places for us to enjoy. We don't collect kai or fresh water from these spaces anymore. What will your government do to help restore the Māori of our waterways?
Yeah, so we are big fans of Te Mana o Te Wai, which is, if people have not heard about it before, it's basically a hierarchy system where we say, when it comes to our water, the number one thing that we should be doing is just making sure that the water is protected, that it's safe, that it's looked after. And then next, let's have a conversation about its ability to sustain us, because we all need water. But that's secondary to the water itself and protecting it. And then third out from that, if we can make some economic opportunities or use it for recreation and the like, then actually that should be allowed to happen too. But that's a hierarchy, and it starts with the actual mana of the water itself. So that's really important for us to consider, because as we go forward in government, we need to make sure that we're constantly honouring Te Mana o Te Wai. The why first, then its effect on us, then its effect on our economy and our ability to use it for recreation or whatever. And we've done that. So as we were looking through the reforms to the RMA, Te Mana o Te Wai, we have to look after the water first. And one of the things that we've been actually criticised for over the last few years has been our work in affordable water, which used to be called the three waters, but essentially it's your drinking water, your storm water, and also the sewerage as well. Councils have told us up and down the country they can't fix it by themselves. All three of those are an interlocking system that we all need to be able to operate our daily lives. But many councils have done quite a rubbish job in looking after those over the years. And so now, even down in Queenstown right now, there's a boil water notice because something's happened with the water supply. And people are still trying to figure out what's going on there. But in the meantime, people are getting sick down there because of the water system not being sorted. I was in Matata over the weekend, and they had a debate there. One of their biggest problems is the reticulation system. Their sewage system is shot, but the Whakatane District Council don't have the money to be able to fix that up. They need to partner with government to be able to fix that up, and that's what we've put in place, an opportunity for councils to partner with government to sort out the water supply, so that the government is helping to take on the problem, but also trying to come up with a solution so that ratepayers aren't constantly being whacked for more money every single year from the council saying we need it. Councils can't afford to do it by themselves. If people out there are passionate about water, drinking water, storm water, wastewater, stormwater does a lot of damage when it's not controlled, as we've seen in some parts of Tairāwhiti. But if people think that that's a priority, then you've got to vote Labour. We're the only ones that are protecting it and saying that this is what the country needs. The other team have already said they're going to repeal it and take it away. But even locally, the council's sitting here going, well, why would you take it away? We actually need it. We really need this to happen in our city and in our region.
So Are there any final points you'd like to make to our community as to your party's commitment to protecting our region, enhancing our environment, and the needs of creating impact against climate change?
Yeah. One thing that I haven't said, which I probably should have, is that for the last 3 years in my work in Wellington has been sitting on the Environment Select Committee. So every bit of environmental legislation, any environmental petitions, any businesses or non-government organisations that have wanted to come and talk to us, talk to our Environment Committee. So I'm pretty up to speed with the kind of issues that we're facing around the country at a nationwide level, which is why I'm so passionate about the affordable water reforms. I'm passionate about making sure that we are tackling our biodiversity crisis that is going on right now. We as a party, and especially as Māori sitting within the Labour Party, we understand it from an Indigenous perspective, the importance of our environment. It's our everything. We've got to look after it, and if we don't, then what's it all about, right? Taking an intergenerational lens on it, saying we're just here as kaitiaki for our mokopuna who will inherit this place and this space. So what can we do to be able to tidy it up as much as we can to leave a legacy for them to be able to inherit? So I carry that with me, and as a member of the Labour Party, I advocate for that. And as Māori, I advocate for that. So whether it's the initiatives that we've had to get people out of their cars and into public transport or their own EV, that's something that we're doing. Work around energy resilience and making sure that we're creating places and spaces to do that better and more sustainably. I'm supportive of that. Any Tairāwhiti work that we're doing to clean up our country from pests which are slowly eating away at our forests, that's a real concern for me. But things like even down to weeds and aquatic weeds, they're taking over as well. We have lots of incursions that are happening in our waterways all around the region, and that needs to be tackled too. Environmental kaupapa doesn't stop, and it won't be fixed with one government. It's the kind of thing that has to last intergenerationally, and whichever government is in power, they should have a complete focus on the environment because, as I've said, it's everything.
Wonderful. Look, thank you so much for coming in today. Ngā mihi nui, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's great to see that one of our candidates is so well informed about the issues that are facing our region, and I really look forward to seeing how you go on the campaign trail.
Cool.
Thanks very much.
Me.
Cheers.